Metro Supply Chain is the official sponsor of the Ask the Experts Theater at Edge 23, pioneering the future of supply chain with investments in advanced automation, robotics, and business intelligence. Metro Supply Chain delivers innovative, real-world supply chain solutions that advance business. Learn more at metroscg.com.
Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Ask the Expert Theater, sponsored by Metro Supply Chain. Metro Supply Chain is the largest privately owned logistics company in Canada, with approximately 100 locations across Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. My name is Sarah. I am the Senior Director of Sales for the U.S. operations, and it is my pleasure to introduce Gary Masters.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. So, welcome to Navigating the Future of Warehouse Automation, Strategies for Optimizing Efficiency and Adaptability. I am really delighted to have a panel of experts here. Guys, thank you for coming. I'll start with my far side. Troy Donnelly, he's Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing and Solution Development at DMW&H. Matt Culp. Matt's the EVP of Managing Partner at St. Onge Company. And Craig Henry, who is the Industry Manager Material Handling for Siemens Digital Factory. I'm Gary Master. I'm President and CEO of Agile Business Media with brands DC Velocity and CSCMP Supply Chain Quarterly. Just a little tidbit before we start. The MHI Solutions community is bringing this presentation to you here live from Edge. Has about 80 member companies. You can see some of the member companies up on the screen. And the entire purpose of the solutions community is to bring shippers, practitioners together with solution providers to solve challenges. If you're interested in learning more, and this is for our folks listening to the video as well, if you're interested in getting connected with the solutions community, we have a QR code that you can scan right now. I'll let that up there for a second. So, having said that, let's get back to our panel. You know, right now we're in a situation where we've got a lot of uncertainty, economic uncertainty. We've got this labor shortage, right? I promise we're not going to bore you about talking about the labor shortage. We're going to talk about solving the labor shortage today. And we've got changing consumer expectations. We've got inflation. We've got so many different things to do that we have to handle. I think today there's no better time or opportunity than today to talk about what's going on in the warehouse in DC. And so let's get started with our panel. I've got some questions here I'd like for you guys to answer. Matt, I want to start with you on this. Not to put pressure on you, but I want to start with you. We've got the overall labor shortage, right? And so we know about it. It's pushing supply chain companies to the brink and to really explore automation. Can you identify some key automation trends and technologies that are reshaping our industry right now? So key trends, things that are reshaping our industry right now.
Sure, and that's a great question because, as you said, labor shortages are what every distribution center warehouse is struggling with right now, and that is what's new or current. I think I'll answer by saying a lot of things aren't new, right? The warehouse, the distribution center, when the business leaders look at it, it's still a cost center. And so any cost that you can remove from the operation flow right to profit. So there's interest in doing that. And even with e-com, yeah, it's an online store, but the website's still a store, it's still a cost center. And so then, that being said, the warehouses are still unloading, they're staging, they're storing, they're replenishing, they're picking, sometimes packing, staging, and shipping. That hasn't changed for decades. And the desire to mechanize hasn't really changed. And you look at that, the picking and the order fulfillment is still the majority of the labor. And so all the technologies and automation the trends right now, and I think what's got the most viability are still focusing on those pick and pack functions and reducing travel. So just like carousels from years before, you have things like shuttles that are and auto stores, or any of the good to picker systems are very popular right now. They'd started, years ago. I think maybe 5 years ago or so, everyone wanted robots. Robots were on every seminar and talk, and everyone wanted to revolutionized the industry with robots. And then through COVID, it kind of looked at the metaverse. And now I think it's AI. And so those technologies are still are becoming, I think, prevalent. But the robots are still there for anything you can do to reduce travel in that pick operation, or to eliminate the travel or long hauls of transports, and to even turn lift trucks into robotic lift trucks, anything to take that travel. I think that's still the trend and the focus, even though what's new is this labor shortage, right? And that's what they're trying to address, and there's a lot more interest in it right now. I think that's what I'm seeing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are you guys seeing?
Well, I think that you're right on the money, obviously. And I like what you're saying, too, about not everything is brand new. Industrial engineering has always been industrial engineering. What we've got now, though, is a big focus on the fact that I don't know of warehouse and fulfillment centers that have plenty of people. Everyone's struggling. So automation has become absolutely necessary. But what does that mean? And so, my point is, same with you. Bring in the technologies that can help you do this. The AMRs, the ASRS systems. These are some big investments, but they can help reduce that labor and that touch, and get you to a lower workforce, albeit a higher skilled workforce.
Any thoughts, Troy?
Yeah, the interesting thing for me has been a bit of the technologies going after different business models. The attraction of AMRs and a lot of the more mobile and scalable solutions is a great fit for 3PL type of applications, especially where something can be redeployed. So kind of the redeployable technologies has definitely been a big trend, versus more of a fixed asset.
Right.
And then at the same, with those business models too, you have different companies that have different approaches coming into the industry. The small startups are looking for, okay, what's going to be the low capital investment versus, let's say a top 100, they already know they have a lot of infrastructure and they're making larger, big investments, and they need solutions that can handle that type of volume, which is focusing technology trends in different ways. And so I see a lot of technology trends that are focusing on specific business models, which is just kind of an interesting way to approach it.
Yeah. There's no one size fits all. I get that too. It's not. You're not going to just say, "Oh, everyone go get AMRs. We're all set." No way. It's going to
I'm
have
glad
to
you said that, because the next question was going to be, what's the one technology that would solve everybody's problem for the labor shortage, right? Just kidding, guys. It doesn't exist.
You said you were going to solve the labor thing.
That's
We're
right.
going to do that.
That's right. We're going to do that.
Okay.
So, but let's talk about something here. It's very interesting to me. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, a lot of companies were flush with cash. So they started looking at automation. They started looking at ways to solve labor problems. And now things have become a little bit more uncertain. Risk is a little bit more, maybe a little more risk averse. So with that risk aversion, how can you discuss an idea for a strategy for overcoming objections for automation? Like, how do you overcome those objections? Like, if I'm a CFO at a company right now, do I really need to spend X, Y, and Z to overcome the labor challenge, or can I get off less expensive?
I think there's two things with it, and we've seen it in the recent years. Historically, call it 15, 20 years ago, automation was always about labor replacement. And in the last couple of years, the conversation with automation has been business continuity. Again, a lot of it because of the labor shortage. If you can't find the labor, are you going to be able to actually operate and fulfill the orders? And with that, there's the competition. You can do anything depending on who your competition is. That if you're not in a market that's highly competitive, complacency is just fine. But when your competitors are doing something, all right, now you have to keep up, if you will. And I always look at it of kind of a leapfrog, that many times when it comes to the ROI justification, I'll say it can be unfair. That you have a lot of operations that I'll say are very efficient, that they continue to lean out their processes and they get every nickel out of it. And then when they try to look at the ROI for automation, it's extremely difficult because they've done such a great job of leaning out their process. In contrast, there's a benefit to the slow, lazy rabbit, if you will, because they haven't leaned out their process. So when they look at an ROI for automation, many times they end up leapfrogging the better performing operation. So there's just two aspects when companies look at automation, aside from labor savings. It's business continuity and what's your competition doing, because you have to compete.
I think there's a kind of converse to that. I don't disagree with that, but I think that there's a boldness that has to be there. And this term risk, I know systems integrators will build a model around risk. Every project they take, what is the risk? How much risk are we taking for this profit margin we'll think we'll get on this project? Well, they're a vendor, but when you're a practitioner, when you have a fulfillment center, you're an end customer, you're ConAgra, you're whomever, I think that fate will reward the bold, and that you need to step back from your organization, look at ideally what do we want, and do the industrial engineering 101.
Yep.
I think we've talked a lot about in the last few years digitalization, and I've even spoken on that a number of times. But my point is, you've got to strategize first. You've got to do the math. You've got to make the model, and then say this is the vision for where it's going to be, and that may be a bold move, but I think that organizations need to take stock of their talent and say, do we have a winning team so that we can execute on that play and leapfrog, like we said. You can leapfrog, but it's going to take boldness. It's going to take a board of directors that you can kind of shake awake a bit and say, look, this is a competitive marketplace, and we're going to either win or we're going to hang on, or we may be gone. And that's how it's getting to this point. Even the big players are struggling with these issues. It's a big deal. So I think there's I guess the sum of what I'm trying to tell you is be confident in your design, and likely I would say design it in software and run it and play with it in the virtual world first. Tip it over, break it, change it, and then you'll get down to a model that says, okay, this fits all of our business needs from an industrial engineering point of view. And it may not mean you have a single robot, or it may mean you have all robots. It could mean anything. So there's so many tools today. Not much is new under the sun, but there are some new ways that you can dip into the bag of technology and get exactly what you need after you've designed the perfect system for your business, which is different than his and different than hers.
I guess the only thing I would add is first just to give credibility to the reluctance to invest, because it is real and it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
You look at these capital projects, it could take 6 months to design it, and then with the lead times on technology, by the time you make your decision on what to do, it could be 2 years until you're up and running. And then there's this realization that technology in the world is changing so fast that you may have invested tens of millions of dollars and have the wrong solution. I think that's the fear, and that's real and that's credible. And that being said, then what strategy can you take to address that is to, do what he's saying is just do your due diligence, have a good design, believe in it, and then be, I think, okay and satisfied with the advancement you made, the ROI that you realized, and the steps you made forward. And then, 5-7 years later, you may need to go through the whole process again. So it's not a once in a decade project anymore. There's more changes that have to happen. But I think the social media has created this FOMO, the fear of missing out, and it's infiltrated the psyche of everyone in America. And there's this fear that whatever you do is going to be wrong. So I think that, just believe in what you're doing, accept the benefits, the changes, and then strategically reassess after that return on investment period.
I appreciate that. I appreciate all your comments, because I've been with shippers and stuff, and they when they open up, they're like, I've got one chance to make it right. I've got a decision I've got to make, and it's got to be right. And if it's not right, I could lose my job. So thank you for stepping up with boldness, thinking about it's real. It really is a real situation right now. So let's switch down a little bit more and just talk about something that's really difficult. And this is one I want us to think about for a little bit, because we want to talk about efficiency. Everybody wants to be more efficient, right? It's a cost center. How do we get more efficient? But in your warehouse in DC today, there's a whole lot of adaptability that needs to be there, flexibility. How do you get flexibility and efficiency? Because sometimes they're not the same, and sometimes they are. So my question to you guys, and this is a tough one. I'm not gonna lie. This is a tough one, right? I mean, how do you have efficiency gain where you're doing it the best you can, but you're flexible to not knowing what's coming through next sometimes?
Yeah. Well, I think that you already understand that what you're asking may be impossible.
I am, yeah. Yeah.
But I think the key to when you start answering that question is you have to have optionality. This idea of optimizing a system is becoming defunct. If I tell you to optimize the dishes in your cupboard, okay, you can do that. But if I change the dishes in the pots and pans every day, optimizing is a waste of time. You need to be able to put them however you need to put them. And this idea of bringing flexibility in is going to come from a design that has that adaptability, that ability to optimize and to optionalize what you're doing. You have to have optionality. So that's going to come from a system that leans more away from hardware into software, because software can change in a second. Ripping out stuff and putting stuff in takes months or years.
Right.
So the more you can get a system that, as your SKU mix changes, as your company buys another company, and now you've got all these other things coming through, or you're a 3PL and you never know what's going on, or you're Amazon and you have more SKUs than you could possibly count, you have to be agile. You have to be able to have that optionality, and that's going to bring you the ability. And of course, once you have that, then you can move into, as we talked about in the first question, how do you shorten lengths of travel? How do we optimize? How many bays do we need? All those things come out in a design. Okay, I've said enough.
Now you guys have had a little bit longer to think about that question, so I want to hear what you have to say too.
That's what I do. I babble and they think.
No, you did good.
Sure, I would say design for uncertainty. So you know what you know when you know it, and so do the best you can to design for what you know, and then allow areas in that design for uncertainty for what you don't know, whether that's building space, whether it's deciding on two different technologies and the one that's a little more modular and scalable as opposed to the large step investment. But just accept it and design for it. Run your contingencies, run your case scenarios. Doesn't have to be sophisticated simulation. It can be a whiteboard session where you're in the conference room with your best thinkers, those that know your business, and you're thinking about what could possibly happen, and then account for it as much as possible. And again, just be confident and move forward.
I think, again, the big thing when you look at flexibility in anything, there is a price for it. There is a price for flexibility.
Great point.
And a lot of times it gets into two things. One is the velocity that you need. So what kind of velocity do you need? That may require a larger investment for technology. And then also the total life. One of the best examples probably is an AMR solution. Very inexpensive, very flexible, very scalable. But it does not have the same life as a conveyor. They're two different things, two different approaches. So if you think, hey, we're going to be able to use this for 20 years, and I need to do this velocity, conveyor might be the right solution for you. Or if you say, our business is changing so much, I don't want to make the investment of a conveyor. AMRs are more flexible, and it's going to provide me the right solution. So there's a lot of business aspects and business planning horizon that need to go into play when you look at the technology. And then the one thing I'll say is, recognizing the speed and technology is changing. It doesn't mean not making a decision is a decision. When you buy a computer, it's going to be outdated next year. That doesn't mean you don't buy a computer. So you still have to make the investment in the business to move it forward, recognizing it's going to change and technology is going to change as well. But you still need to move forward.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about implementation. So we got a strategy, we want to do something, we have overcome some of the challenges, we've gotten the C-suite to sign off on it, and now we're going to implement a new technology. Thoughts, comments, and strategy for successful implementation of that. So you might be putting a new technology into an existing workflow. What's that look like? Just some thoughts on that.
I'll say two things with that. The first one is, and this is the most common thing I've seen, is people wanting to automate a manual process. And I'll just say, through my experience, that provides the lowest ROI. That whenever you look at automation,
Good point.
you need to reevaluate the process to leverage automation and get the most out of it. Automating a manual process, again, I've always seen that to be the poorest ROI. The second thing, in regards to implementation, my experience has been the majority of issues on implementation are software. That the mechanical, many times everybody, there can be supply chain issues, there can be things like that, but those are kind of easily tangible, and you can throw labor at them to help get them back on track. When it comes to software issues, it's not like shoveling dirt. The more people you throw at it, the worse it gets.
Exactly.
So whenever there's implementation issues, I would just say, that everybody needs to be focused on software and almost micromanage it.
I'm a big simulation proponent. My first job when I got out of college was to walk around with a wheel through a big facility and bring drawings up to the CAD guys, and they would put everything on CAD because they had to get what they had figured out in a virtual way before they could reorganize and do flexible manufacturing cells and all this other stuff. So I was, baptized into that world. And now I see with the tools we have that if you can get a digital twin of your operation, that gives you the flexibility to do lots of things for very little money. You're doing the software, and you can run your facility virtually. You can really actually run the code, run the robots, put orders in, but that is an investment. That's a big investment in having people and some software tools. But once you have that, then you have a continuous closed loop digital twin whereby you've got what we're doing today, but we're getting ready for what we're going to do next. And as things change, we can change them in software while our facility is running and see what happens and modify in that model, and it can continually feed back even in real time. So that's an ideal that very few companies are doing. But when they get to that level, there's a whole new world of new efficiency. And I think that's the new frontier for where people are going to see quantum leaps or big step functions in how much they can improve their customer service, their profitability, their throughput, their optionality, even their scale. But it is a big investment up front, so it takes faith. And not a lot of people have that faith. That's been my experience. But so in implementation, which was the question, I think having that as a forerunner gives you a lot more sight as to what will really happen in the real world.
Thank you.
My implementation strategy is simple. It's just plan your work your plan. And we've all heard that plans are useless, but planning's invaluable.
Absolutely.
And I agree, the failures tend to be these days on the software side, not bolting stuff to the floor.
Right.
And I think looking back, it's lack of planning. And I don't think you can plan enough. And all that dwell time after you made your decision, you're waiting for the stuff to arrive, that should all be intense planning time. Meeting with the project teams. On the software side, a lot of what I see is that there's multiple systems running the operation. And you have to be very clear on where one company's responsibility ends and the next one begins. And at those touch points is where you get the finger pointing during implementation. Well, I thought you would do it. I thought you would do it. And all that could have been handled through good specification writing. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but it's incredibly important. And lacking the plan is where I see a lot of the issues in implementation.
Absolutely.
And it's simple to understand, but really difficult to put in place.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I'd say is don't assume somebody else is going to do it. I see that a lot. I see a lot of people assuming the vendors got it. Vendors assuming the software people have it. A lot of people assuming someone else has it and no one's got it. So either take responsibility or assign people to take ownership.
Yeah.
Because without ownership, there's no accountability. Without accountability, you don't get the results.
Thank you for that advice. I was at a conference about 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about implementing technologies to solve the labor shortage, and it was packed. and they're asking questions and question after question. And good advice, like you guys are giving us how to think about how to implement, what to think about as far as looking at new technology. But then it's like there was a question that came from the room, and it was like, what's worked? Do you have a case study or a couple of case studies of what's worked implementing new technology for labor shortages? Gentlemen, what do you see? What do you think is out there as far as case studies, companies that have done a good job maximizing their automation investment?
Well, particularly for material handling, I was lucky enough to go to DigiKey, which is in Nowhereville, Minnesota. It took me 11 hours to get there. It's way north, and they are a almost $5 billion privately held company that sells electronic parts. They installed a gigantic automated storage retrieval system, and they're moving from 28,000 shipments a day to 50,000 shipments a day. And all they had to do is move it from the old, warehouse into this new system. It changed everything. And they said, and this has been a multi-year project, of course, and they said they're already planning their expansion because it has leaped them forward so much in the reduction of handling. It is as I think Troy mentioned, it's a parts to person new model. I was on site. I had to talk because I run my mouth, and I referred to it as a big vending machine. It was essentially a giant vending machine that gives parts. They come in and they go out. And later, the management team of that company saw me at a trade show, and they said, "Oh yeah, there's that guy. He's the one who called our business a vending machine." I thought I was in trouble, but he liked that. He thought that was right. But I'd say they're an example. I give those numbers because that's in the public domain. But
Sure.
That was a $300 million project, but it's going to take them, they said, into the future. It's going to change their competitive advantage. Now, that's a big leapfrog move, but it's adopting a technology that we're seeing across the board in some of the big players, which is an automatic storage retrieval system where very little touch. I will mention another thing. When I've been talking about software implementations where you have a digital twin and you're running code before you even put cabinets on the floor and are doing conveyors. If you do that, you can see a huge decrease in time in your execution and a reduction of errors as well, because you're going to tip it over in software. And then when you implement, you're managing less exceptions. And so you can see, and we have case studies at Siemens with like 60% reduction in cost and time. And integrators have told me that they spend 70% of their revenue, time, labor, et cetera, after they're on site. It's all been designed, it's all been drawn, it's all been engineered. Once it gets on site, that's when they start troubleshooting. That's where the problems come. That's where and the schedule pushes out.
Thank you. Thanks for a great example.
Yeah, I can't reference specific customers, but I'll give you, kind of the good and the bad is, the one thing with automation is it's not auto magic. And that is where a lot of customers fail, is a perception that, okay, this is going to fix all my ills.
Right.
And I've seen great, well-designed systems fail because of lack of ownership of the customer, really, and thinking that the system was going to do everything for them. In inverse, I've seen systems designs where it's like, geez, that's a little bit on the fringe, but they make it work. And that ownership and recognizing that it's not auto magic is going to be the biggest play on how successful a project is.
Wow.
When a customer takes ownership and they understand, at the end of the day, this is what every supplier, I think, wants, is for the customer to understand that system better than anyone else when it's implemented, because that's going to ensure its success.
Yeah, and I think I want to underscore what Matt said earlier too, because that really resonated with me. If you have a fuzzy front end, it's going to be hard to be successful. The plan has to be well thought out, articulated with functionality, with expectations, with, oh my God, support after when we're running and who's going to be called. And it's 3 a.m. and it's down. I've been at centers where things go down, some nuisance stop happens and every robot stops. How do we get that running? Who's going to call? Who's going to come? You have to have all that in place. And I think the fuzzy front end is something that Matt mentions, like you've got to do your planning. And again, automation is it's a technology, it's a tool. You don't buy an air wrench and say, The tires are going to fix themselves now. We have an air wrench. No, you have to have it as part of an overall strategy. And yes, implemented right, it's going to be great. But it's a tool. Software is a tool. AI is a tool. Computers are not going to take over the world. They're stupid. They're going to do exactly what you tell them to do. If you don't tell a robot to not go this way and go that way, they'll run into a wall. You have to have a plan, and then in the execution, it's tedious. It is. It's difficult. None of this is easy. It's like a sport to me. So if you want to have a winning team, you gotta put the time in, have the plays, get the plan.
Matt, your thoughts?
Sure. I thinking of a different case study, maybe a different angle that addresses your balance between flexibility and efficiency.
Oh, okay.
And so one thing we haven't talked about yet is seasonality and the challenge of seasonality with automation.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
in the one client, it's a specialty retailer. We went through the buying decision process, and part of that process was visiting sites. And we saw a number of sites with, we'll call it high levels of automation, automated sorters, some ASRSs, but they went to the building that in order to meet the demand for season, they had 3 high-speed sorters. When we did the tour, 2 of them had dust covers on it, right? And so that created a little concern with the people going through. But that is the reality. If you want to automate to meet your seasonal peak, that's what's necessary. So they, at the time, this was maybe 8-10 years ago, they took the approach, let's balance efficiency with flexibility. Like the solution, like the unit sorter, the approach, put it in, but for the design year, plan to have that unit sorter only doing 65 to 70% of the seasonal peak demand, and having a put technology that required some labor to handle that additional seasonal peak. And so what that meant was the high investment was running at about 80-90% most of the year.
Yeah.
And so all the people that ran it loved it until they didn't, right? They loved it until they didn't because the solution required labor at seasonal peak. And now all of a sudden that's not available, and that's what changed. And so what they had was a high return on assets, a high return, high utilization, high ROI, very good investment of capital with flexibility to go to the put system that had to change. And so, like I said earlier, have confidence in what you're doing, go forward, get your incremental steps, and they did that. They saw a good return. And then what they had to do was revisit it, go back in and say, okay, we had too many people in this put system, what do we do? Well, we'll go to a more modular automated put technology to automate that put process, to take people out of that process. So it's a nice balance and reacting to the realities of the macroeconomic realities of the time. So,
Cool.
So thank you, gentlemen. We've gone through the justification of getting senior management to sign off on it. We've talked about some implications of installation. We talked about some success. Let's talk about after it's in place. If we've got a labor shortage, which we do, and we're trying to solve the labor shortage with whatever it is, automation, new tech, whatever it looks like, that tech comes in. What do we do with the existing labor pool that's there? What's it look like as far as upskilling goes, or training of the new employees or the existing employees for that automation? Should it happen from the vendor? Should it be done at the site? What are your thoughts?
I believe that I think there's a lot of automation installed right now that people aren't necessarily happy with, and they're not getting the return that they thought they would for a lot of the reasons we talked about. And that means that I believe there's a lot of opportunity for people to get more out of what they have.
Yeah.
And so it's not just upskilling the labor you have, but how can you work smarter with what you have? And I'm intrigued right now by it's a book I read, The Spatial Web. It talks about Web 3.0 and how the transition to the technology stack of data sitting in the cloud, which a lot of people were concerned going from on-site servers to cloud. We're comfortable now, and mobile apps and having the apps run the algorithms. That the spatial web, the Web 3.0s. I'm sorry. The interface now is augmented reality, virtual reality, the Internet of Things, and the algorithms being run with AI and ML, and how to incorporate that. And the data now sits not just on the cloud, but on the distributed ledger technology for the security and other purposes. And so I'm intrigued on not just what you're doing now, but what the next 2, 5, 10 years look like with this new technology stack, and what you can embrace there. And we just heard a session on AI, what it is, what it's not. But You saw, everyone saw the Kiva example of how it's working. And so that is a good application of how you can use the data that you have to make better decisions and work smarter, not harder, with what you have. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great.
It's a tough world right now. The statistics are frightening with respect to the level 1, level 2 skill level in fulfillment centers doing manual labor. The turnover is incredible. I've heard numbers of, in very, very big players that I can't mention, of 300% turnover a year. Average, another one said, average time of employment, 91 days. Incredible. So we're in a place where we have to do something. And I think having a more attractive job than carrying stuff or, walking for miles and all these things that have to happen, giving alternatives to those so that the workplace is more attractive, so that those numbers can get better and we can have a longevity of workforce. And you asked about training. I think training is absolutely essential. Where it comes from, you mentioned some places. I think yes, everywhere. There has to be a means of transferring knowledge about these incredible systems that I have to now read up about that Matt just talked about, that I don't know what that stack is he's talking about. But I can figure it out, I think. But to understand how that's going to affect the workforce. And there's going to have to be a big uptick in what the workforce is going to be expected to understand. Not everyone has to be a PhD. I'm just saying that they're dealing with technologies that are going to be implemented that they may have never seen before.
That's right.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing in the companies that I've seen be very successful, they have heavy collaboration between suppliers and themselves, because everybody has, I'll call it, their area of expertise. Right. And it's not realistic for people to be aware of everything. And just like, as a lot of suppliers, not an expert in that person's operation. They know, the specifics of every day, of every season, and the uniqueness of it. And, so many times you end up hearing, well, I didn't know, on both sides, both from the supplier and the customer, of, I didn't know you did that, or I didn't know you could do that, or can you do that? Sure. And a lot of it can be with software too. Sure. It's like, hey, we're just fighting with this one area. Can you guys do that? Sure. No big deal. And that gets into the training too, because as we deal a lot of times with very senior people, let's say within operations who have a lot of tenure, they are very knowledgeable. Well, then you have the junior people starting, and they're starting at zero within that customer. And a lot of times they're coming to us or coming to other suppliers saying, hey, can you help us train this person to try to get them up to speed? So I think the collaboration within training is only going to increase because the sophistication and complexity of the systems.
Gary, just one other thing I wanted to add is that I like to challenge the top with some of my clients, and when they say we can't find good people, and they don't stay, we have this much turn. That was crazy turn you mentioned. And I say, well, you can't find good people and keep them at what you're paying, or you can't find good people and keep them at your work environment. And you mentioned training. I go into these operations, the people want to do a good job. They're good people, but they don't know what to do because they haven't been trained or given the tools. Or they can go get a job at a fast food place and make more money. True story. Mm-hmm. So pay them a living wage, train them, create a work environment that's enjoyable, or as enjoyable as possible, and you'd be surprised how many people stay. They're rare, but I've seen those environments, and that is possible.
Yeah, I think that's where you can win. I think I've heard it said, and when I was a younger man, I thought this was baloney. I thought when they said there's no such thing as a bad team, only a bad leadership, and I thought that's crazy. There's terrible bad teams. I'm sure there's bad teams. It's not true. And that book, Extreme Leadership, by the guy, the SEAL team guys, they proved it. They said absolutely. If you can get, and it gets back to what you mentioned, if you can get that from the plan that we say is so important, and having no fuzzy front end, being clear about what it is that our metrics are, if you can get that collaboration and that clarity communicated through the organization from every side, saying, you've done a good job because this number is good. You did this and you were able to do this, well done, and you set that up correctly. And I've seen it done wrong. I've seen good people leave from fulfillment centers because they were extremely good performers, but they kept asking them for more and more and more till they broke them. It's silly. It's a stupid thing to do. And then others were performing way down here and they weren't expected to do the same thing. So I think there's just clarity of communication, like you said, about what is expected and set it up with leadership so that everyone can win, so that they can enjoy the job, they can see progress, they can see performance, and we all do this together. And it can be that way. It's just really difficult in a sprawling fulfillment center to do that.
So we're almost out of time. They will be available here for questions right afterwards. So please have questions for them. But I got one last question, and it's a big one. I want it to be like you heard it here first.
Uh-oh.
What are your prediction or predictions for automation in the next couple of years? If you had to make a prediction, just give us something. It could be small or it could be big.
Predictions. You can make me start? All right. I'm thinking of...
Wise, he goes, you go first.
I'm thinking of... Okay, this is silly. I'm thinking of Clubber Lang, Mr. T from Rocky 3.
Yeah.
Any predictions for the fight? He said, predictions, pain. I think that we're still going into a period where labor is going to be a problem. It's going to probably get worse before it gets better. I think automation is no longer a question. Are we going to do it or not? The MHI organization does a study every year, and I've seen the number go from, on the question of, are you going to invest in automation? And the absolutely we're going to went from 37% to 68% to, we've probably topped out. I haven't read the latest one, I should. So I think automation is going to happen. I think a lot of it may be deployed poorly. To Troy's point earlier, if you just mechanize, you're probably getting the worst return on investment if it's not part of a larger strategy. If you can just do this one thing faster, is not really going to change your business. So I say automation is an easy one for me to know that is going to happen. I think we're also going to see a culling of the herd. I think there's going to be winners and losers, and because it is a hyper competitive environment, and that it's hyper competitive. You've got to be great.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and it's unfortunate, like let's say the culling of the herd, is that in the last couple of years we've seen massive investment in venture capital and throwing money at everything, and they're not all going to survive. And with that, the ones who are surviving, frankly, or I think are going to survive, are frankly the ones that in some ways have more focus, that they are addressing a specific market need. I've seen so many companies come in and they have technology and looking for the application. The ones that are going to survive are the ones that understand the application, and they focus the technology around.
There you go. Do the basics really well. That's pretty much true of anything. Football, cooking, anything. Do the basics really well.
Matt, you got the final word.
This is it.
What's it feel like to have that power?
I think that we all heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting new results. Like he said, the labor shortage, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. The lack of people that engage and want to take ownership, I'd love to say I think that's going away. I think that's going to continue to be a challenge, and so I think it's going to have to be addressed differently. And I think as you walk through the warehouses of the future, there's going to be more technology addressing that. So I think you're going to see a lot more augmented reality. I think you're going to see a lot more AR tools for training people as you walk through the DC. Since you can't find good supervisors, good managers, you'll have these augmented representations or virtual reality representations of that expertise that's needed to do the job better. So I think those new technologies, and then I'm a little more optimistic of where AI is going than we heard at 8 o'clock, and I think there is a lot of potential for what I've heard called weak AI versus strong AI. Strong AI is that autonomous cars and trucks that can really do what people do, but weak AI is just using machines to take data and do things that humans used to be able to do. And I think there's a lot of applications to, again, work better with what you have, applying AI technologies, machine learning. You said software, getting the software to continue to improve, and then introducing new technologies like augmented reality to create the work experience within the distribution center is going to look a lot different, I think, 5-10 years from now than it did 5 years ago.
Gentlemen, we are out of time. The panelists are here for questions afterwards. Thank you for a great session. I appreciate each of you. Thanks.
It was fun.
Thank you.
you.
Happy for that.